Okay, everyone. Welcome to the May 25th session of the Prescott Planning and Zoning Commission. I don't have a gavel, but I don't need one. Shoes work out so small. Okay, let's get started. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the April 27th meeting.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion? No? Everybody in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, public hearing item, RZ 117-001, rezoning for Franklin Heights subdivision. We're going to...
Mr. Chairman, the applicants have requested you table the item. They're going to meet with the neighbors to discuss their project, to hopefully gain some support from nearby property owners. They will be back to us at some point in the future. When they alert us, we will alert you in advance, and we will renotice the neighborhood.
Okay, do we need to postpone it to a date certain?
They did not give us a date certain, so I would suggest your motion be to table the item.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to table item 1.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion on it anymore? All you in favor, raise your right hand. Say aye. Okay. All right, it's tabled to a time unknown.
Actually, I do have a question for George.
Okay.
George, when people come in with an application, are they encouraged to talk to their neighbors?
Yes. We always suggest that they talk to the neighbors before they submit the formal application to us, because once they do that, it sets off our public notice process. If they don't talk to the neighbors find out what they're going to do when they get
Right.
notice from us. So
So it
the difference
could
between,
sound to a neighbor like they're going behind them or around them.
or at least that you didn't
There's
take them
always
into
a
account.
reaction, you
So
know.
we encourage them to go talk to the neighbors first, but it's only an encouragement. We can't force it.
Well, yeah.
Okay, let's go back to item
Thank
2. Continuation of site plan review 17-003, Crown Point Apartments.
Staff has no new information for you. We do have a revised video from the architect for the project, and we did get revised drawings for you that show the section through the hillside, through the site.
Got it.
That you have in front of you. So the architect has asked me to just run the video for you first, and then he will talk to you about the changes that have been made.
Okay.
I have no idea if the sound is going to work well.
It's going to work.
Is that the highest building there?
They're all the same height.
I mean, elevation.
This is the three-story side of all of them. All of them are
So
similar.
the second building from the top is the height.
Oh, yes, that's right.
But all of them enter at the middle.
Middle level.
Right.
That's correct.
Is this video depiction accurate to slope and?
This is very close. Is it? Yes.
Okay, George,
Okay,
anything to
I'm
add?
going to turn it over to the architect. Staff has nothing new for you.
Okay.
last time we were here, the commission brought up a few items that you were concerned about, which we adjusted in this plan and this animation.
Okay.
Several items were they were concerned about the slope of the main driveway coming up. So just due to the slope of the land, we still have to keep 12%, which is the maximum the fire department allows, but we created flat spots where we turn into each driveway.
Okay.
So if someone was sliding in the ice, they'll have a place to hopefully stop if it's icy. Also, a concern was provide a walking path, continuous walking path all the way through. So we've got steps and sidewalks connecting all the buildings and the lower street to the upper street as well. Provided that, and also another safety feature along the sidewalk and driveway was a guardrail, which is a railing. So we provided that, and then we tried to improve the appearance of the building by adding some stone details and so forth. I think that, from my memory, was the concerns the commission had last time. Of course, we provided the site sections, which hopefully shows that how it fits on the hill, and hopefully shows that you can see that most of the units have views of downtown.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize that there was going to be so much excavation, but
Well, we wish there wasn't as
that
much.
makes it work though.
Yes.
Could you point out the walks the connecting walks you
There-
said you added?
They were on the video.
Is there a site plan that we can show?
It's on the site plan.
Yeah, want me to point it out on there?
No, I was hoping we could get a site plan up, but we can't.
Yeah, I don't have
I don't have
it.
one that fits
It
on
was,
this overhead.
it was along here.
Right.
And
That
then
was
we
the railing.
connect into the main sidewalks of each one with a crosswalk
Crosswalk.
here. And then
Okay.
here we could just come down here and then connect over there. So there will be a continuous walking path from top to bottom, so.
So that's a walk you added along the driveway
Sidewalk or stairs,
And a
depending
rail?
on where it is. so.
and a rail?
And
So it's
rail.
a sidewalk and a rail.
That's correct, yeah,
Sidewalks on the outside?
correct.
Well, no,
Well, it
it's
varies,
the
but
downside.
there's one on that side.
Is the sidewalk on the Montezuma side?
That's correct.
It's on the Montezuma side of the roadway.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's here.
And I could get on my skateboard.
Oh, you could die
Wow.
in 42 seconds. Yeah. So I'm looking at the cross section here. This says 4,215 square feet.
Height above,
It says SF cut.
volume cut, square yards, that would, yeah, that's square.
Cubic yards?
Cubic yards, I'm sorry. Yeah, what does it say?
SF.
Square feet.
Square feet.
So it must be cubic feet, yeah.
Okay.
That's his fault.
Well, George, did you have a chance to at least discuss this with the traffic people again?
We talked to the traffic folks at the beginning of this process, at the pre-application review that occurs before a formal submittal occurs. Their only concerns expressed were relating to Bagby Lane.
Okay.
It is pre-existing roadway, they're not requiring the roadway be modified. It is a concern, but the fire department's perception is it's slightly less of a concern. I'm sorry, I'm jumping to fire because the two go together. The
Right.
street slopes and the fire department access are the two reasons why we have a maximum slope. All of the buildings will be fire sprinklered. There is a secondary access coming out of the Dexter neighborhood to the south.
Right.
It's sort of an out-of-the-way roundabout route for the fire department, but should one be blocked, they do have an alternative way in.
Right, there is continuity.
So they believe this will work for them, it meets their code requirements, and they, again, because the sprinklering, they're a little less concerned about the steepness of the street slopes. The internal driveways are not something that the traffic engineer would have comment on. He's a public street traffic engineer, he's looking at our streets.
We would have pulled an
Internally.
opinion out of him.
Yes, internally, what he's gonna tell you is that there's a reason we settled on 12%.
Okay.
They can stay at that 12%. It would meet our minimum requirements.
Okay.
Not
Yeah,
necessarily to
problem is-
ideal, but minimum.
Well, the problem is, you know, we're concerned, it's a very difficult site, and I think they've done a pretty good job solving it. But we're concerned about the ice, the north-facing driveways. But you know what? There's nothing in the code that says that that can turn down a project because there's ice on the north-facing driveways.
That's correct. And one of the benefits is the majority of the site is south facing because of the slope. So you do have some areas that are north facing. The peak of the hill where the highest point of the cut is their building 2. So building 2 is the top, and then as you go south, it starts falling back off again. That's what gives all of the buildings a view of downtown. So that gives them some advantage of potential for sunshine to help melt the
Yeah,
ice.
well, my concern is that main driveway coming up, but it is
Yeah.
definitely facing south. Or facing north, you're right. Then facing north, which is not good.
It's
Which is
east.
not good.
This driveway?
Yeah, this is the one.
East and south.
No, it's almost.
Yeah.
At least it's
So
on the east side of the building.
From building 2 north, it slopes away from the sun.
Yeah.
From building 2 south, it's going to be exposed.
Yeah, it is kind of east, but it's basically gonna be it's gonna catch ice.
Oh, yeah.
On that north side.
George, is there a stipulation, can we make a stipulation as to grade on the, since the city's traffic engineering department doesn't necessarily monitor internal roadways?
No, but there are internal requirements. The
Yeah.
fire department has
Right.
driveway requirements
12%
within
and
the site. That's same 12%. So we do have a code in place that they would have to meet, and we will enforce it from an administrative standpoint. So it's probably unnecessary for you to put a condition on a recommendation for approval of this site plan unless your intention is to try to condition it beyond what our city code requires.
Well, my thought on that whole thing is that typically you don't have, how long is that roadway, 300 feet?
Far more than that.
I would say 500 to 600 when you exit
Typically, you
around.
don't have that length of grade. My thinking is, at least my visual concept of properties and what I've been involved in, is you might have 50 feet, maybe even 100 feet, that you have this grade. In this case, you have such an extended length that something out of control can really get out of control by the bottom of that hill.
There are flat spots.
Right,
That each,
they go about 70 feet, and then
Right.
it goes
you know, so.
2 car lengths and then 70
Like
feet.
100 feet, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you could bounce off of that into the next one. It just seems like a very lengthy, I don't know that the anticipation of a 12% grade number had 500 feet of that grade. My hunch is that we were looking at a lower number.
Generally, it's
Distance.
relatively shorter distances.
Yeah,
Especially for
and-
roadways.
I'd like to see my biggest concern with this project is, I love the buildings. I like the layout. I think the views can be nice, that can make them attractive complex that will stay rented and won't be an eyesore to the community. I like that there's access here off of Viejo, but that's very difficult. I don't know how to get there. It's hard to get there. You have to.
It's definitely a secondary.
Yes, you have to know how to get there, or once you get out, you'll wend your way out. My biggest concerns is this roadway is 500 feet with slope. And the amount of traffic that's gonna enter Navajo from Bagby. And that's really not a intersection that's anticipated 250 people roughly coming and going. That's a funny intersection as it is, and that's really what I wanted to talk to Ian Mattingly about, because you've got you got that hillside road that comes in from Hillside, I don't know what that little stub is called, and onto Navajo, and then you got this coming at the same time. So you're gonna have a lot of things going on in that triple corner. My concern, I really would have liked to have heard from Ian about how we handle that, not so much the internal stuff. I suppose there's not much we can do about having a 500-foot ski slope here. I like the project, I don't mean to demean it in that sense, but I've never seen something like that, even in Prescott Lakes, where they've had many terrain issues on the subdivisions. They figured something out. I'm worried about that. If the city's not worried about it with their codes, and we keep talking about the city codes to protect that, then I'll shut up about it. But I am concerned about the Navajo entrance and this 500 feet. Beyond that, I think it's a great
Well, I
project.
do, although I don't see any options.
I mean,
They will be required to have a traffic impact analysis, I believe, for that intersection. There isn't much that can be done with the intersection of Navajo and Bagby. It pretty much is what it is. There are not many modifications that can be made to it, given the terrain, given the angle of the streets entering one another. The primary traffic flow out of this subdivision will be making a right, controlled right-hand turn, there's a stop sign. That's generally something that's less of a problem for other traffic. The largest amount of traffic, the peak periods, are generally exiting a site, not entering a site. Everyone leaves at the same time in the morning, but coming back, it's scattered over a larger time period. So they will have to prove that it's safe before they get further into the process. Before we start reviewing building plans, that's something that they'll have to prove to traffic engineering. At this stage, again, site plan review, if you recall from the last meeting we talked, the site plan review process is tied to a water allocation process. Site plan needs to be recommended as a practical, not necessarily optimal, but practical design. It can function for council to consider granting water to you. So I think your determination is really going to be focused on, is this a functional project? Not necessarily the best, not necessarily what you would do,
That's a
but
good
does it
point.
meet our minimum requirements, and do you think it would be a functional design
Good
should
point.
it go
Does
forward?
council know that point?
Phil?
Yes.
Well, you gotta realize too that North Point Academy, this is a access point in that intersection on Navajo. Probably at the same time, a lot of these people are gonna be working. You know, this is probably
Sure.
workforce housing. So when North Point Academy is either.
Yeah, I don't believe there's a direct connection to Bagby.
No,
But they
well,
come
it's on
around
Bagby.
and through this
Right,
intersection.
And they come
Yes.
through that same intersection
Yes.
at Bagby. So you could have a lot of people going to work at the same time, people are coming in, dropping off their kids, trying to get out there, they have significant traffic impact.
But again, traffic's looked at it, right?
yeah, I mean, I certainly have reservations about it. At the same time, if it meets the code, I have a hard time telling somebody,
Well, that's-
no. I mean,
that's
you
what
know,
I'm saying.
you design to the code,
Yeah.
and then you get turned down.
I
It's like-
think the ice, snow and ice situation is a management problem, right?
Boy, is it ever.
And-
And that's not easy to control.
And you can't, yeah, I mean, you can't control that, you just, although if the management doesn't take care of it, they're not gonna have tenants staying there too long either.
There's only a
You
few,
know.
there's only a few people in town that will plow your driveway, so on the snowy days, everybody's in high demand.
Right. Well, that's, like I said, that's a management problem.
I wonder about the access on Vallejo, because, I mean, you'd think if you're down in Building 5, that you're gonna wanna try to go out that way as opposed to going all the way up the hill and around and through the complex.
Again, North Point right up here.
But once you get out onto Vallejo, you can't get anywhere without doing that very thing, driving around through the neighborhoods, up the hills.
And then you get arrested for that.
It's a good secondary access, but it's probably not gonna be a functional access for most people there. If you were headed west, and
Yeah.
you actually knew how to
Yeah,
get through the
I would
neighborhood,
think so.
that would be a useful route.
And I don't remember, what would the theoretical maximum, you know, with the existing zoning, what could they theoretically put on the site, you know?
I
I mean,
Paul,
I'm
it
just,
was close to 200.
Oh, easy.
yeah, I mean, it's, I think that our theoretical maximums
So you're about half?
are out of whack. I mean, you'd be real hard pressed to get more units on this.
You got a number on there, George?
6 acres. So
I
you're
don't
talking-
have an exact amount, no, sir, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have it in
It's a
my-
6 acre parcel, you could put, my golly, you could put, oh,
It's
by
about-
code.
About 21 units an acre.
This is, yeah, but you could put more than
They're
that.
just below.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the only way to, greatly reduce the slopes would be, I mean, you cut it in half in terms of number of units and have a more circuitous route and all. I mean, you could do all sorts of things, but, if this meets code, like I said, I have a hard time saying no. I think the
Well,
other
you can
thing
put
that,
elevators in it and make them higher too, and stack them up.
Tom, I got another question. I have a question for the applicant, and I'm not trying to design your project. What was the rationale, say, on building, this is building B? Or 3? On building 3.
Uh-huh.
Well, did you take a look when you were doing this about moving that building over toward that long 500-foot driveway and making people have to go around that?
Well, we do have that, we have roads on the west side as well, which the fire department requires.
That's why I asked the
Those
question.
are, you can travel those if you like, but, this was just shorter, just having a straight shot there, so.
But was there a physical reason, I'm trying to be careful with what I say here. Was there a physical reason why building B wasn't moved over to the east?
3.
Oh, 3. Was building 3 wasn't moved over to this 500-foot thing and have traffic come to it and go around as a break for that 500-foot
So
section?
your main drive aisle is an S curve.
Right, there are roads on both sides,
Right.
but it was just for the convenience of the 250 people living there,
Straight
that they
shot.
don't have to do the
A
S
straight shot,
through the,
yeah.
it's just a shorter, more convenient path to connect all the units together.
Well, it would be for building 5 and 4 that would have to do that.
Is the driveway on the west?
If we moved building 3 over,
Well, it's
Then it's
full
just-
width of the lot.
correct,
Yeah.
but if you move that building over to the 5, to break
Uh-huh.
up the 500-foot driveway, it would be for buildings, you're right, buildings 4 and 5 would have to do
It'd be a
this.
big S shape.
Yeah, we would.
Or
introduce-
they would just come in and take this route over here.
Well, and one thing to consider in that is the fire department's already required the secondary route around the west side.
Right.
So if you move the building over to the east, they're still going to require a secondary route on the east side
That's
Right.
true.
Secondary route on the east side?
instead of on
West.
the west side. Right now, the secondary route's on the west side.
Is that
of each
west
of the
side
buildings.
driveway one way?
Well, it's a two-way,
It is a two-way.
yeah.
It's 24 feet wide.
Right.
What's the slope on that one in
It's
comparison to the other? It's the same 12?
George, are you saying that the fire department wants access on both sides of the building?
Yes.
They did require
They're
that.
They require
provided,
this.
provided access on both
So that-
sides of the
so that
buildings.
You've got access.
That creates the 500-foot.
That's
It
right.
also
No.
creates 2 routes down. If one's iced over, you have a secondary route for the fire department primarily.
It's like they're sprinkled.
They're,
And sure,
they're also the same slope, so I don't know how beneficial it is to have a secondary route.
500 feet, isn't it 500 feet?
but if a car gets stuck on one,
There's another way to go.
There's another way down.
yeah,
That's
correct.
right.
hopefully they can get around. But anyway, like I said,
The guy with the four-wheel drive.
I think it'd be nice if it were a more gentle slope by going along the driveway, but at the same time, if the code says 12%,
That's 12%. That's it. I mean, George's comment, I think he says the solution isn't perfect, and it's not, but you've got a really difficult site too.
Yeah.
And, I think they did a pretty good job of solving it, although it's certainly far from perfect. But I don't see anything in there, Ken, that would tell us by code we can't tell them that they can do this.
Well, no, I agree with you, and I don't want to tell them they can't, because I think it's a good project, it's a great use of a piece of property.
We want apartments in
Yeah.
the city, and
I'm just trying to break up 500 feet of that.
I understand.
That's all I was trying to get to, and not trying to design your project. If there's impediments to do that, then there's impediments. The impediment will always be the 500 feet of 12% slope, which I think is not anticipated in our code.
They're certainly, from a marketing standpoint, encouraged to do the best they can with it, right?
Oh, yeah, I suggest renting it out in the summertime. So I'd like to.
Coming from an ex-apartment owner.
Yeah,
Right?
don't get my question, don't misconstrue me. I just was trying to break up that 500 feet, because that's my concern is not so much the 12% grade. My concern is the length of the 12% grade. That gains a lot of momentum.
The secondary driveway kind of appeases me a little bit on that. What do you think, Bill?
I have reservations.
Okay, let's hear them.
Just the amount of the drop, it's over 70 feet, fairly short distance. And it's been articulated, it's a great project, I agree with that. Well laid out, good plans, but I don't know, I still have a problem with the slope over the main driveway. It's, particularly during the winter, it's going to be
Yeah,
a problem.
I think we all do agree with you there.
Yeah, and I agree also that, from a coding standpoint, it's,
Well, I think it's the sort of project that you take the good with the bad, or the bad with the good. Because there's just not a lot of options, other than the way they solved it.
Well, especially we've got the fire department telling us they want access on 2 sides, 3 sides, 4 sides of a building.
Effectively.
Yeah.
I've never seen a project in this town that had access all the way around each building.
Well, the driveways on the west side are alternative routes for access within the site.
Right.
So it's not to provide firefighting capability, and they're 12% slope.
And we
They
have-
fight the fires from the parking lots, either the lower or the upper
That's
on
right.
each building.
I don't understand that, but that's apparently what it is. It's sprinkled.
Well, except that's a good thing, you're saying, that they do have that second access. I think it is.
Well,
I mean, it appeases
yeah, I don't
a
want
little
to
bit.
get in the face of the fire department saying that they have to have 2 routes or
No.
each building has to have a roadway around each building. I've never seen that in our town.
No.
It really isn't. It's to provide route through the main part of the site. If you look at where it's located, it's really just between those middle 3 buildings.
Right.
They give them access around, so that should something happen on that steeper main driveway slope, they still have a way to get in and out. It's also to allow for evacuation of the site. So if you had a fire, people are going to leave. You want to be able to get the fire department in, and the people who are leaving out, and preferably on 2 different routes if you can do it. So that gives them some options there.
On the sprinkled building, they all want
On
to
a
get.
sprinkler building. Sprinklers slow fires, though. They don't put them out.
Okay.
Well, I don't think we're going
Yeah,
to go
sound like
anywhere.
I'm starting to sound like I should work for the fire
I
department.
don't.
Yes, you are, George.
I don't think we're going to go anywhere differently if we postpone this or anything. I think we should go ahead and act on it. And like I said, it's, as far as I'm looking at it, I'd take the bad with the good.
You do have the ability to recommend this to council in favor of the site design, expressing a concern. So if you want to express that concern, that can be transmitted to council with your recommendation. It may be that you express the concern and the acknowledgement that there doesn't seem to be very many options open to address the concern.
Well, our concern is being expressed right now, right?
Yes.
And it will be in the staff report.
Yes.
That the main concern we all have is
Steepness
snow
of the
and ice
driveways.
in the winter.
Let me ask one more other question to beat this thing to death. If the fire
Not
department,
there yet.
it's not dead yet. If the fire department didn't require what they're requiring, could one of these buildings be moved over to break up the 500 feet of 12% slope?
Yes, they can, but we did break up we have the, as you can see on the site plan there, we do have a straight road, but we did break up at every driveway access, we have a flat spot. So it's not a straight 12%, it's 12% for 70 feet, then a flat spot, and then 12%, 70 feet, then a flat spot. So that, hopefully that flat spot for, you know, 2 car lengths would, hopefully someone could get stopped in that length. But yes, your answer, they can be moved, but George's comment was we still have to have access around there for the fire department, so we're not achieving
But
anything.
the premise of my question was, if the fire department were not an issue, could that building, one of those 2 buildings be moved over?
The answer is yes, and that was really one of our first schemes, was a complete S. But then we connected it because the fire department required access on the other side, so.
I'm fine with that being on the record.
Okay. Let me make a point that in the staff report,
We will do that.
point out the concern about snow and ice.
And the 500-foot length. And if the fire department can see some other alternative, then perhaps that gives them the option of breaking up this 500 feet. And doing
Are you kidding me?
No. Well, it is sprinkled.
Fire department's not gonna change their mind. They don't do that. Okay, I think we're gonna close the public hearing then, and on it, and I'll entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to approve this site plan. Let me get my things here. And George, I want to be able to make a motion with some of the salient points we've talked about here presented someplace. I don't know how you do that.
They're in the staff report, that's why I was making that point.
We can mention the discussion and the concerns that were expressed during the discussion
In
in
the
our
staff
staff
report.
or you can make a motion to recommend approval of the site plan, but advise council as an addendum to that motion. So you would follow the language, for instance, that we recommended to you, and follow that up with, but expressing the concern of the commission that the steepness of the driveways potentially are a problem in the
Okay.
future.
Then I will make the motion to recommend approval to the council of site plan SI 17-003 Crown Point Apartments with the condition,
But not a condition.
with the understanding that the 500 feet of roadway be,
No, you gotta
Help me.
reword that. You
Help me.
gotta reword that.
Is a concern to the commission due to
is a serious
long
concern to the
grade,
commission,
long
right,
slope.
as well as access onto Navajo from Bagby. Those are that's my motion.
And concerns of snow and ice.
Yes, specifically, the intent of your concern is
That's right.
winter times, the 2 months of the year or so that we would have potentially snow and ice on.
So put that in the motion.
Did you get that, Darla?
Okay,
Thank you.
do I have a second?
I'll second.
Have a motion, a second, any further discussion? Phil?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
We've done as much as we can.
All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
No opposed.
Thank you very much.
Have fun.
Appreciate it.
Have fun.
You guys do your own videos?
Yes.
Very nice.
Can I give anybody more coffee before we go on?
One has to sign the seal.
Give me pizza.
I do. From yesterday.
Everything is, it even goes out of office. You know, I think that, also, I hope
Yeah,
your certificate
okay.
expired.
No.
It's the
right.
500 feet, I don't think.
But
We started this 2 years ago, yeah.
Oh, really? They do have shelves.
Well, thanks for letting me know.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Like I said, it's a community management.
We had a car years ago, we had a couple of cars slide out on the Little Creek Road deal apartments.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, a 10% grade.
You're gonna have to get that snow off that road as soon as you can.
Or they can variegate the road and
At
they
some
do.
point, at some point, you can't protect someone from themselves.
Well,
That's true. And you also can, well, I don't want to get the fire
That's a
department,
little
but can you do things on the road to make it stop?
Oh, up to Cathedral
We
Pines.
actually provide
That sucker's.
They would provide some.
18%.
It's a.
I think we did the right, the best we could here.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Steak strips.
Yeah, that's space.
No.
That's a southeast thing.
We need to talk about your background.
Anyway,
Took me a while to understand what that was.
Okay, folks, we're going to move on to other business items, discussion of the amendments, the land development code.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
George?
Some of you have been on our Unified Development Code Committee. Some years ago, we came to you with a proposal to modify the SPC district, the Special Planned Communities District, to allow for it to be applied to commercial properties. At the time, the intent was just to provide additional flexibility to commercial developments to use a master plan type of development process rather than individually zoning portions of a large parcel to accommodate the zoning. It gives the developer considerably more flexibility because they can create a single zoning district and then adopt a master plan to control the land uses. And that master plan, because of the language of the SPC, becomes the land use control of the site. It's proposed by the developer, not imposed by the city. It's proposed by the developer,
Got it.
approved by council, and at council's approval, it's set in a development agreement. So it's a legal framework for us to enforce in the future. City staff would then enforce the master plan as if it were zoning for the purpose of anything that's brought to us to develop within that subdivision. We have a single residential subdivision now, Hacienda subdivision, that is a master plan community that is entirely zoned SPC, so it's a single blanket zoning, but it has a master plan that controls the uses of the property within it.
Okay.
So it effectively has its own miniature zoning code just within that district. Again, it's proposed by the developer or by the owner of the property. So we're giving a flexibility to a property owner that we wouldn't normally have with zoning. The zoning is going to be imposed by the city-owned property. Pretty much everything inside the city of Prescott has a particular zoning district already in place.
Okay.
There are some relatively large commercial properties, primarily commercial properties, that are moving through the design process right now that would benefit from this change. Allowing the flexibility, allowing the property owner and the developer to propose his land uses rather than the city staff imposing land uses on them. That is sort of the trigger for us to bring this back to you. The last time we brought it through the Unified Development Code Committee, I don't believe we actually made it to the Planning Commission for review or discussion of it. It was just those members who are on both the committee and the commission who got that preview. So we're bringing it back again, looking at potential for some relatively large developments in the future that could benefit from being able to create their own internal zoning, their own master planning process, propose those to the city council, and negotiate them with the city council for an adoption through a master plan under that SPC zoning. Again, gives flexibility to our code that we don't currently have. So we're looking at a two-step process for master planning when that occurs. A master plan is proposed by the developers, reviewed by staff for specific code criteria. We want to make sure that it meets the basics for a master plan. But the first review is by the Planning Commission. The second review is by council, just like a rezoning would occur.
Okay.
Any amendment to that in the future would follow those same two steps, just like a rezoning. Again, the main benefit is that it gives flexibility to the developer to come up with a master plan rather than have the city's zoning be the control, the direct control. So we rezone the property to SPC, and then everything under that layer, all of the actual development would occur subject to the master plan control.
Two questions. If you already have that process in place, i.e. Hacienda, why are we It's already here.
Because currently the code says that
Residential.
SPC district is a residential zoning category and cannot be applied to
But
commercial
they snuck
property.
in a club, a golf
It's okay to
clubhouse.
have, you can have accessory
Ah.
uses within it. That's how they got the clubhouse, and there's an office building as well, the commercial office.
That's
building
right.
there.
Okay, so what's the other question is, what's the limitation currently on PUD?
A planned area development approach is available, but it's controlled by zoning. So you can't have the uses within a planned area development cross the zoning boundaries. So if you have a piece of property that has two or three or more different zoning categories, the planned area development can reshuffle them, but they have to stay within their particular categories.
Okay.
So if the planned area development included residential and commercial zoning,
Right.
the residential has to stay on the residential side. It can be reshuffled various ways. Density can be transferred or moved around, but you can't cross over into commercial and vice versa. So again, this gives you considerably more flexibility if you're a developer and have a
Because the
land
master
planner who's
plan,
helping.
the
It
master
doesn't
plan
have to.
controls, not the zoning
That's correct.
boundaries.
The whole property will be rezoned to a single district that will allow both residential and commercial uses, the SPC, but they're subject to a master plan.
It
approved
would
by city
require a
council.
master plan though to
The
follow up.
language currently requires a master plan.
In
so
other words,
we
if
changed that.
it's zone, FPC, then they have to bring in a master plan.
Yes, they have to have a master.
Before
plan.
they can do any development.
They will have to have the master plan at the time that council approves the rezoning to SPC. That's a requirement of the SPC district, is they have to already have a master plan. So if we modify the language in the text as shown, I gave you one sheet with just those sections that would need to be modified, that allows someone to start the process once this becomes effective, but they will go through a planning commission review of their master plan.
Okay.
And they will go through a council review of their master plan.
Okay.
Before the rezoning can be confirmed by council. So council will adopt the master plan and rezone the property to SPC in a single action. Well, two separate actions concurrently.
Sounds to me like it's kind of like the camel's nose under the tent for introducing new urbanism into our general plan.
It doesn't introduce anything.
Because we
but
fought
it-
that in the
but-
general plan.
We did, but at the same time, we fought us imposing it on someone.
That's
through
right.
the general plan, rather than if
If
a
they wanna do
developer
it-
wants to do
If
it,
they want to do it,
this
fine.
allows them to do it.
I see.
So again, this adds a considerable flexibility to the code that we don't have now.
Interesting.
Okay.
I had a question.
Well, that's a benefit for the developer.
Yes.
Tell us what the negatives are in this.
The only negative that really can come out of this is that we don't have, actually, I take it back, that's really not a negative. We have considerable control through the review and approval process of where they put the uses in the master plan. Master plan review is treated just like a rezoning review. You guys will look at it from the planning commission perspective, the city council will look at it from the legislative perspective, they'll adopt it. The downside is that it allows a great deal of flexibility. It's a double-edged sword. On the property that's being developed, it's great for the developer. On nearby properties, some of the anticipated known development patterns that we have with zoning, that's what zoning's for, it's to tell people in advance what to expect. The expectation can sometimes go away. What you have is a wide open possibility that someone could come in and ask for pretty much anything through this process. So neighboring properties potentially have lost some of the, trying to get the right word for it, some of the
Attractiveness.
expectation that they have of what can happen on adjacent properties.
I see.
It doesn't necessarily cut them out, and it doesn't create a situation where nearby property owners are adversely impacted. What it does is require a great deal of effort on the developer and the city side to make sure that neighboring property owners know what's proposed in the master plan. We already do that. The state law requires us to notice either by posting or by mailing or by publication in the paper. We do all of that. We're required to mail 300 feet out from a rezoning. We mail 500 to 1,000 feet regularly, and sometimes far beyond that, depending on the scale of the development. So I don't know that from the city's perspective, there's a negative other than sort of that loss of expectation that we have with zoning right now. If you move into a piece of property and you know the property next door is zoned single family, that's all that can happen there. If it's zoned commercial, you know what can happen. It's the list of uses permitted in commercial.
Okay.
So this takes some of that away.
So, George, sometimes I need it in simple terms. So what would happen in a case like this is a developer would come in and submit a master plan.
Correct.
And within that master plan, there's various types of zonings.
Various types of uses or a use patterning scheme.
I don't know what that means, so let me finish my question. You can
Sorry.
come back to that one. You frightened me with that British word scheme.
I didn't say schedule.
So we have this master plan, and it comes to the planning commission,
Right.
and we get to look at it. And master plans are tough because it's an unknown, and it's just a plan, and it could be for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years in existence. And then all of a sudden, they do some development, and the developer realizes, as is most often the case, that the initial plan wasn't quite what the reality of life is. So different uses come into demand, and different priorities, especially in a community such as Prescott, where we don't have the intense demand that a more urban environment might have. It's hard to predict what our future's
Yes,
demand
the
is.
demand shifts around more.
So what happens if they say, well, we had this zoned as multifamily, and this we had zoned as industrial, but we want industrial's hot, and we want more industrial. What's that process? Does it come back to the planning commission?
Yes. So an amendment to the master plan would come back to the planning commission for review and recommendation, just like a rezoning would. That recommendation would then go to council with a proposal for council, so they will see what planning commission's concerns are.
So how is it different then?
It starts with the developer and the property owner, instead of starting with the city. We
But
impose.
Deepwell Ranch did the same thing.
Deepwell
Started with
Ranch,
the property owner.
only because their annexation into the city involved a master plan. So they did a master plan at the annexation. They had the ability to do that because it was annexing in. This could be applied to undeveloped properties that are already within the city that may not be controlled by a master plan.
Okay, let's touch on that point a minute. It seems like it only relates to larger parcels.
Not
Are you going
necessarily.
to limit the size for this kind of SPC zoning to certain minimum size?
We'll have recommendations for that,
There
but I
should
don't
be.
think we want to have an outright limitation, because it could be applicable to smaller sites. It may not be, square miles, it could be acres that we limit it to.
But
depending
there
on
seems like there ought to be a
circumstances.
limitation, though. Because it just wouldn't be practical for
Provide a
small
minimum lot
sites or
size.
infill sites. This is like a raw land sort of thing, like
It's
my
most-
fan project.
It's
or-
most effective for raw land sites, yes.
Right.
I see this as kind of like a business park, where a commercial developer has a large park that he wants to develop and then market it to tenants. So that developer then can sell his plan to those tenants with a more likelihood that their businesses are going to be allowed to operate under that master plan, where currently each one of those tenants would probably have to apply
They have to
for
build
approval.
those. That's
right?
correct. And you're right, that does provide almost identical flexibility to what you described.
Is
The
that-
difference is it allows for something bigger than a business park. It would allow for
Oh,
a business
well,
park and a neighborhood and a school.
Okay, it's
and
it's
all of it.
basically for mixed use.
It is a mixed-use allowance.
In other words, if I come in as a developer and I want to do a mixed-use project, I don't can't necessarily put together the zoning, the parcels that are zoned properly. So I want to do a master plan and do a mixed-use project. I want to do,
And our-
commercial surrounded by apartments, surrounded by condos, surrounded by townhouses,
Yes.
So what's the idea?
Our current mixed-use
Yeah, like
zoning,
Deep Well, similar.
If it was coming in without the annexation allowance, it's almost as you described.
Because if it wasn't mixed use, you
That-
wouldn't need the flexibility.
that area would allow for a a good application of this.
George, I'm still confused as to what the advantage is. If they have to come back to change some, to request some zoning, or modification of the master plan,
Right.
what's the advantage?
The biggest advantage is the developer or the property owner develops what they want in the master plan. They're not restricted by existing zoning districts. Right now, if you come to me and say, I want to develop this piece of property, and I look at the zoning, the boundaries on it, the city has control over the use of that property through its zoning. They have limitations, not control. We have limitations on that property through its zoning. This allows the developer to come in and say, I don't want industrial over here, I want a school over here, I want residential around here, and they lay it out for themselves based on their concepts, their design. We review it to make sure, similar to what you did today with the site plan, to make sure, what you're gonna do is review it to make sure that it's a practical design, that the master plan is something that could develop out in the long term. You're not controlling their ideas, you're just verifying that it would work. And then they take it to council. At the council level, it's negotiated into a contract.
Mhm.
There's an agreement that holds them to
The
that
development
development
of
pattern.
sorts.
They have to follow the development pattern that council approves.
Yeah.
And we, as city staff, when we get development projects in, review those projects per the master plan, not
As
per
if-
our land development.
As if that was the actual zoning.
Exactly.
And then,
So
when
it
they
starts
want, when
with
they
the
want
property
to
owner.
change that,
They
then
have to
they
go
have
back
to
through the
come
same,
back.
the same process that they did to create it in the first place.
and the same process that everybody else in the world has to go through.
Okay.
So
Effectively,
what's,
yes.
so what's the limitation on current PAD that will allow that?
The zoning boundaries.
So
So you can do a PAD, but you're still controlled by the underlying zoning district boundaries. So it doesn't let you have the flexibility to just shift things
Can
from.
can I currently do commercial under PAD?
You can do a commercial PAD,
I can't.
and a commercial zoning district with commercial PAD does allow some residential uses, as you know.
Okay, so this is like allowing a PAD with mixed use.
It's a large-scale PAD concept, but again, it starts with the developer or the property owner's concept rather than the city's
It's like Prescott
zoning
Lakes, one
concept.
area with commercial, with residential, with apartments, with everything
Well,
else.
it's, yeah, they work with.
If Prescott Lakes were to come into us today with the kind of design they had, the eastern half would be appropriate for an SPC district. It has commercial, it has residential,
Yeah,
it has
they got
recreational
senior
uses,
housing, they
all
got- yeah.
within that area that they've.
Yeah, you got the commercial there with all the dentists and the sign
Well, and
Yeah.
you got a senior housing project and you got a bunch of stuff.
So when, the importance then is when we see the master plan. That's really the most vital time, isn't it?
And at that point, you're looking for, is this a practical, appropriate layout?
And-
Will it function, just like you review?
Well,
site
We would
plans
look
for
at
functionality.
things like, okay, they're anticipating and hopefully having multifamily here. I don't like the industrial right next to that multifamily. That's the time to have said that.
That's correct. And once that pattern's been set, the control over modifying that pattern still lies with the property owner. We would not go back and say, we changed our mind, we don't like this layout.
Right.
He has to come back, she has to come back to us with a design and say, I want to modify this because now that I'm starting to sell property and it's developing, this makes more sense than that.
Sure.
And then
But it's not a whole lot different than what we did with Prescott Lakes.
it isn't, except Prescott Lakes had to conform to all of those zoning boundaries.
Yeah, because you
And
set
this-
the zoning boundaries in the master plan.
We adopted the zoning before Prescott Lakes submitted the
Okay,
plan
this
to
master
us.
plan would be more flexible.
It works the other way around. They submit to us first, and then we apply the controls to the master plan.
Okay.
What's the genesis of this? I mean, somebody just didn't think this up and decided we needed it. It must have come from a developer who said, I
It did.
need more flexibility.
The original concept came with the Hacienda community design. That was our first mixed-use master plan community in Prescott. When they came in, they were used to developing larger municipal areas that had that kind of flexibility built into their codes to allow for master plan communities. So they proposed it to us, and the city accepted and adopted it into the zoning code that was in place at that time. It was called, I can't remember, sorry. It had a different term. We changed the name when we adopted the land development code in 2003 to SPC, Special Plan Communities. The other one made it sound like it was very restricted type of use. So when we adopted the Land Development Code in 2003, we carried over the concept into it from the Hacienda Development's master plan process. And it's been carried along but not applied, mainly because it strictly delimits it now to residential use. And allowing that flexibility of involving commercial, we would move it to the commercial category, as you noted in the changes in the code language, because that's the broader category that allows everything else. Our codes are hierarchical, so you can go from higher intensity to lesser intensity in the commercial or non-residential districts. So again, the downside is it takes away some prior knowledge of adjacent property owners as to what could happen.
Right.
Because it's going to be controlled by a master plan that gets negotiated at the time they submit it. But it grants a flexibility that we think would greatly help development in the area by allowing the developer to come up with his ideas, instead of constraining him before he even starts deciding what his community is going to look like.
Well, for instance, I mentioned new urbanism. Theoretically, you could not do what it proposes under our current codes. If I wanted to
That's
build,
correct.
if I wanted to build a new, brand new community out in the middle of the fields out here, okay? And I want to build a little downtown with a square, surrounded by shops, little apartments above them, all tree-lined streets, keep out all automobiles in that area. In other words, propose no automobiles in the center of the city.
Pedestrian-
Everybody rides
pedestrian
bicycles, everybody can walk to the factories, which are setting around on the outside, right? Like that'll ever happen. But that would be something that I could not build if I envisioned that under your current code.
It would be very difficult to do it under the
Right.
current codes.
Okay.
As opposed to modifying the SPC to allow that kind of thing to be done. New urbanism is generally tied to form-based codes, as you know.
Right.
This doesn't provide any restrictions. It wouldn't stop someone from applying new urbanism or form-based
No.
codes,
Okay.
but it doesn't require them either. So they could come in with a standard approach to land development, which is to have geographical zones where different
Right.
types of uses could occur, land use groupings or something like that. There are probably 50 different ways that you could apply that type of flexibility outside of standard zoning. From a staff perspective, we're excited about it.
Yeah,
because we
I
think it
don't
gives
know,
the
I don't see a
flexibility.
downside on it if a developer wanted to come in and do something like that, or do something really different,
Mhm.
outside the box, you know?
Well, so the one point, excuse me, I'm sorry,
No
the
problem.
one point where the negative that I mentioned could occur most is a relatively small infill development.
Right, I
It's
don't
already
think that'd work.
surrounded by existing development, there's already established.
I don't think
pattern.
that would work. I think you need to have a limitation on the size of the
We'll
project.
look at and recommend a limitation. We're gonna bring this back to you for a recommendation. So today's an introduction, discussion.
But this would allow a Henry Ford to come in and open a factory and build houses all the way around it and build a little village in the downtown, and
If that's his initial dream.
if that's his dream, and
If that's-
this would allow him to do it,
I've seen scenarios like that.
right?
Yeah.
Those aren't too many.
All these things, right?
There aren't too many
Not
of
too
them.
many have actually been done, nor are they successful.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it
I
doesn't.
saw, well,
It
I've
takes a
seen
good land use
this
plan.
Dearborn thing, and I've seen Reston, Virginia,
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
and I've seen a couple others that have tried that years and years ago. Well, of course, Corbusier tried it in 1920, right?
So there is a reason why land use types are separated from one another.
Yes.
Zoning was first created
Right.
because of a conflict between certain types of uses.
Incompatible uses
Exactly.
adjacent
So it's
to each other.
incompatible uses.
Yeah.
The determination through the process of the master plan review by this body and by council as to whether or not they're creating situations where you have incompatible land uses. It's still there for you to do. It's just through the master plan instead of the zoning.
Well, I get the impression that it's going to reduce public awareness and public input as a program or a development like this progresses.
Probably would. You're right.
I mean, I've heard so many times that, you know, the overwhelming approval of our general plan based upon the election, and the hundreds of people that I've talked to say, have you read the general plan? I think I've come across 3 names. So the same kind of thing could potentially occur here with a big master plan development that's approved. Public's not really aware of what the real impact of it is, and then it's hard for them to come in as it's being developed and say, we didn't really understand this, and we really didn't want this, and
Well, this would,
where is their input?
it's a good point. It would take personal property rights to a different zone, a different limit,
It could.
right?
It could.
In other words, I go out and buy my 20 acres out in the middle of nowhere, and pretty much, if I could get that master plan approved, I'm ignoring everybody around me.
Based on the
You could,
master
but
plan, but
again-
if I hear George correctly,
We would review
Phil,
it. We would review it.
when you want to change something, the process goes back to what we have today.
Effectively, the notification process is the same. I think what Commissioner Good's talking about, though, is within a development. So you adopt a master plan, and you create a residential neighborhood next to an industrial neighborhood, which is terrible.
Shame on
It
us.
probably won't happen. The property owner who comes in later and purchases that property still has some expectation of what will happen. What it's based upon becomes a little bit fuzzier in that it's a master plan and not city zoning. So we're not gonna have a big map on the wall that says, here's all of our zoning districts.
Right.
But zoning districts they're flexible. They can be modified. They're modified already. The difference, I think, is that it becomes incumbent on the developer to be more open to everybody about what the issues are, rather than the city being
Well,
responsible.
the public
for it.
input would occur
At the
at
master
the
plan
review of the
stage.
master plan prior to being approved, right?
But again, just like us approving a rezoning or an
The
annexation,
public would have all the input they need.
but the public who shows up later and buys a lot in that development needs to have an expectation, and that, the responsibility for making sure that they understand what those expectations are,
Yeah.
does slip away from the city and falls on the property owner instead.
Yeah, okay.
If we approved that master plan in that manner.
That's correct. So we
And
would.
if it changes, however, and I keep drilling this one home,
If
if
it's-
it changes,
It
it
goes-
comes back to the same process we have today with zoning.
The whole public process, again, the
That
city of
answer what
Prescott
you're
has.
concerned with?
Potentially.
But I think the bigger concern, again, Commissioner Good, I think, is worried about people who buy within that development and then having something change. They're the ones who, it's not the neighbors around it necessarily.
How is that
One of the
different than
things you
today?
look at,
How is that different than what we have today?
to a degree, it's not.
I mean,
Zoning
we had
changes.
the case that was postponed today of the neighbors owning single-family homes, a massive protest based on the literature we received.
Really?
And then it was a zoning change with potential from RO to multifamily. How would it be any different?
It wouldn't necessarily, except that the responsibility for making sure that the neighbors know this falls on the developer if he's proposing a change. We're still gonna know this. It's just,
Oh, you're still gonna notice.
we're still gonna notice.
Then where's the responsibility fall on the developer then?
If he sells property to people within his development,
Mhm.
and again, I'm sorry, I'm focusing on the inside, not outside
Right.
impacts. Outside impacts, we handle that like we do any rezoning request. Outside impacts are gonna be addressed by us by notice. Inside that development, if you're selling property to someone for a use and you're not making sure that they understand what the adjacent use.
Say residential, use example,
Yeah,
say
you're
residential.
not doing your job as the developer and manager of that development.
By telling them what the other zoning is around them?
No, by telling them what can happen within the master plan community. Well, what I foresee the problems occurring is I buy a house in this master plan community and right across the street is a commercial area and, 5 years after walking my dog there for 5 years, somebody comes in and builds a theater. Now I live across the street from a theater. And
But you knew it was
that's a
commercial,
concern.
but you knew it was commercial when you bought?
You should have known,
You should
but it's a
have known,
master
right.
plan.
Because it's a master plan.
So again, the responsibility comes back to the property owner, the developer, to make sure that he's selling this and that he's telling.
Are those
what they're-
different
what they can
uses in a
expect.
master plan defined by legal descriptions?
We would require that they be defined somehow, not necessarily by a legal description. A
There's
legal
something
description is a
equivalent of?
geographic space. So it could be zones, it could be districts, it could be specific properties, legal descriptions. There are a lot of different ways someone could come in and do this. if you go out and just look at master planning concepts on the internet, you're going to find there's 20 different processes that could be followed.
Sure.
Could be form-based codes where they use transects as different sections within it are allowed certain size or types of buildings. It could be a miniature version of a zoning code where you have zones or you have districts that allow certain types of uses. Or in some cases, the districts are reversed. So
When-
as
when
you
we
go through the
record-
hierarchy, you eliminate uses rather than add them.
The state of Arizona requires public reports.
Yes. This would not alleviate someone from having to provide all of that information.
And doesn't that define for the consumer what some of the things in the, some of the risks might be in that
It
public report?
should, yes. It may not be as defined as zoning, but it should give them it should reference the master plan. It should point a property owner to the master plan. Go look
Interesting
at it
concept.
before you buy.
Well, I like the flexibility aspect that, you know, you guys seem to like that direction. I just, as I said, I hope it's not the camel nose under the tent for form-based zoning, which I disagree with.
Again, we would not impose it. We clearly got that message from the planning
From the
commission,
hand
and
to
council
general plan,
supported that
we
message.
shot it down.
That council supported that message.
Good.
But it wouldn't preclude it if a property owner
Wanted to do it. That's right.
Again, this is somewhat of a reduction in land use controls if someone chose to go through the SPC process. Because
Right.
they then have the ability to create their design.
That's the only way I think a project of that sort would work, is having the developer control every aspect of it. Otherwise, it's, you know, that kind of a thing wouldn't work like I described, you know, with walking and bicycling and
Right.
if something, and eliminating automobiles. If somebody really wanted to do that,
It would be difficult for us to.
it would be difficult to do it in
Zone
going through
it
normal,
for
a
that
normal
purpose.
process.
Right.
Do they still have to follow what some of the guidelines of our zoning stipulations are, height, setbacks, all that stuff?
All of
Write
that
their
could be
own.
addressed through the master plan.
They
So
write their own.
you effectively give them a blank slate to come up with their proposal, and then you review it to make sure it actually works.
So our land code book goes out the window.
For one of these districts,
For
the
this
only
district.
thing that our code would retain are certain design characteristics that are safety related. You have to have 20-foot wide fire lanes.
Well,
Those types of things, they're all called for in land development code, so that's what we would
But
apply.
all the rest of the zoning stipulations, height, density, all those things go away.
Wide open, they can propose whatever they want, it still has to be reviewed and
Is that what you're
recommended
talking
by this body to be something functional, and then approved by council. as
Hard to
something
do for
functional.
1,000, 2,000, 3,000 acres, or even 500 acres, isn't it?
But it's actually
anticipate.
easier to do with that than it is to
Easier
try
to
to
do
do a
with that
smaller
than a
scale.
smaller. That's why I was saying there should be a
Because you have much,
limitation.
you won't have neighbors if you have 100 acres or 500 acres of development that's going to occur, like you would if you tried to infill in downtown or you infilled on a piece of vacant property in Prescott Lakes.
I don't think the concept of SFC scares me. I think it's, you know, it's kind of progressive, of course. What do you think, Joe? Say that word. I know, that's a bad word, but
I like
Well,
it.
it's actually,
Your way.
it's innovative in that we take away codes over properties through the zoning process. So it's sort of reversing the traditional 1950s era zoning
Yeah.
that pretty much everybody in the country has.
What precludes me from building a 100-foot building?
that doesn't scare me, though. I don't.
Proximity to the airport might be one thing. Approval to do so through the master plan approval process. Ultimately, if the city council refuses to adopt the master plan, the developer has nothing. So there's a negotiation that has to occur.
Or they can make it, ask him to
But
modify.
doesn't a master plan still label some of these parcels with our existing zoning? Multifamily, commercial, industrial, doesn't it label it with that?
Probably.
They could, but again, there are many different ways you can master plan property. So they could do it by districts or boundaries, physical boundaries, geographic boundaries. They could do it by the form-based, sorry, I keep bringing this back up, Mr. Minister. Form-based codes use what they call transects. There are certain zones you create based on how close you are to an urban core. It's not actually drawn as a zone on a map. It's a description that controls it. If you have streets of this width and you have lots of this size, this is what you can do. If you have wider streets and different size lots, this is what you can do.
So that's why your
Huge-
caution is that if you bought into this as a consumer, you bought a parcel in there,
And
you
didn't
really don't
understand-
know the restrictions on the other parcels.
You should be able to find out the restrictions on nearby parcels through the master plan process, be able to review the master plan.
But not quite as simple as this.
It's
If
not-
I buy a
it's-
house,
it's not
and I
as
know that there's
delineated
commercial
as,
property across the street, I know that its height limitation might be 35 feet. I know that, because I got my city stuff there, my real estate broker told me and answered my question. In this case, you'd have to go look at the master plan to see if
Exactly.
that could be 100 feet.
Exactly. So it puts a little bit more requirement on a buyer, perhaps, to make sure that, buyers are aware, they know what they're buying, they know where they're buying, what can happen nearby. So it does do that, but the flexibility, from staff's perspective, the flexibility for the developer to come in with their own concept offsets the potential for someone not doing their due diligence at the time they buy and actually verifying what's in the master plan.
And you probably won't know until
Well, I
somebody
think-
comes in and does one of these.
But I think you're more likely to look at the plan for your neighborhood. I mean, if you buy into
Well, sure.
it, you're gonna look at that information, whereas you might not come out of the city. But
Our
it seems-
presumption is they're gonna make that part of their marketing scheme.
Yeah.
They're gonna show people where they are, what the master plan overall looks like, what they can expect in the future, because you're trying to attract them to particular parts of your development.
But if you start moving around the boundaries of commercial, residential, over what we exist in zoning, it sounds like we'll get into general plan amendments too. I mean, you start,
Unless it was in the middle of nowhere.
We actually have a zoning, we actually have a general plan category, a mixed-use category that would allow the SPC
On some
zoning.
cases, it seems to me.
I don't know, I mean, you won't really know until one comes in.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. That's right. But I don't think I'm afraid of it. If somebody wanted to come in and try a new concept,
Besides, by the time this comes around, we'll be off the commission. It's okay.
We've done it.
We will come back to you with the language modified slightly to address a minimum area requirement. I heard that from
I think so.
from a chair, and I saw
think
heads nodding.
There's a limit, there's a certain size where it simply wouldn't work.
It's too small, it
Yeah.
wouldn't work.
Or if it's in.
Too many existing conditions around it that you would run into conflicts with.
I just don't see a compelling need to make this change.
Like I said, you may make this, allow the SFC and no one would ever use it.
It's possible.
It's possible, it's never,
It's
no
possible.
developer would ever do it.
But
The
we
idea
are,
just didn't pop in somebody's head and decide to bring it through.
Phil, I'd like to hear more about what your
kinda
fear is.
well, actually, I mean,
Phil.
we have, we have some,
I kind of look at it as
Pressures
an
for this.
expansion of a PAD concept, basically, but,
it's similar to a PhD.
Okay.
It'd be interesting to hear a developer who's thinking along these lines talk to us about what the advantages are. I mean, I don't see how you,
I suspect within the next month or so, you will have that opportunity.
that would help.
And you've already heard an introduction to it.
Yeah, because, what's the
Well,
reason
we
this
heard-
is needed over?
we heard Zucker come in and give us a spiel about form-based zoning,
Now, more recently, I think,
but that was,
yeah, we've had some areas in town where there are potential development in the relatively near future that this would be appropriate for.
Mhm.
And that is an impetus to bring it back to you
sure.
at this point.
Okay, so what do we
None today.
need to do?
Nothing today, we will put it back on an agenda for you probably in a couple of weeks or
Okay.
a month.
We can
Notice
beat it
that.
up.
Or an action item.
Give us some chance to think.
I would like,
Yes.
Tom, I really would like to hear Phil detail his
Okay,
concerns.
No, I
He's-
just, this would work as long as you have a very conscientious developer who's full disclosure. I can just see them marketing such a development, bringing in residential property owners, maybe on a first phase, and then as their success attracting commercial they're moving the lots around to accommodate the commercial tenant or buyer. And all of a sudden, you know, you got a stamping mill across the street from 4 or 5 residential homes, and people are going, what the heck happened here? But it meets all.
Assuming we
these-
missed the fact they have industrial next to residential.
Assuming,
No, but that would be approved in the master
But we
plan
would-
originally.
well, that's true, but we'd have a chance to look at that master plan
Does
and bring up that
Prescott Valley
question.
have this?
Industrial adjacent to residential.
Right,
We'd have to pick it up in the master plan.
right. But it would be sold as
I'm not
being, you know,
involved in that.
a very minor imposition, and because of that, you're gonna get a lower price. But then they find out it's 100-foot high.
A batch plant next to the church?
How much do those jobs pay for? That'll be the argument.
Well, you know, more than
Yeah.
Burger King, I'm sure.
Okay.
The only concern I've got is I don't want to see this being used to get us to the point where we have Prescott Valley, where you've got businesses right around the corner from residential just about everywhere, it seems, up there. That would be my concern.
Hopefully it would be planned better.
Yes.
But that would be,
Instead of just growth, you know?
Yes.
that would be incumbent on us then to notice that in the master plan.
Yeah.
So we'd have to really
We'd have to
scrutinize.
really scrutinize the master plan, really scrutinize it, and give, and, you know, and the city council too, and with lots of public input.
Because if I understand
The
this,
majority of that responsibility and ability is going to fall on this body to look at, because that's what you do.
clearly then, that obligation or that decision of the master plan becomes in effect the zoning.
Effectively, yes,
It does, sure.
So we have to pay attention to it.
Right.
definitely. And
Okay.
staff would pay attention to it from.
And if
our
we're
side.
taking this much time for a 3-paragraph code, it could take months for a master plan.
It could take multiple meetings
Do
for
we need a
master plan.
formal
No, sir.
continuation?
This was just an introduction to, we will bring you back some different language again addressing minimum sizes
Okay.
for action on future agenda.
We have anything else, George?
I do not.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.